Nebraska's soybean crop is in remarkable shape according to the latest USDA condition reports. 73% of the crop is rated in good to excellent categories, and only 7% is rated poor to very poor. Nearly a third of the state's soybeans are setting pods, 18 points ahead of the state's 5-year average. Earlier this week, we talked with UNL Extension plant pathologist Loren Giesler about the possible benefits of fungicide applications to soybeans at the R3 growth stage, a subject UNL researchers have been looking at for many years.
Well, we've been looking at fungicides, for over 10 years, really, and looking at it on the crop stage on, when the best time to apply is, what types of products, these sorts of things for a long time. And really, with a lot of that data, what we see is that R3 time, which a lot of the crop's in right now.
And what does it show that at that R3 time an application would do or would give or might give to your soybeans?
Well, and that's the thing, I wish this was consistent that all the time it would return. It doesn't return all the time. But we do see that, state average in that 1.7 to 2 bushel per acre range for just the fungicide that would have a strobilurin fungicide as a component of it. A lot of products now are in combination, but we sure want to make sure we have a strobilurin in there. And with that, then a lot of times producers are putting the insecticide in. And in a lot of our studies, when we add the insecticide with it, it doesn't have to be an expensive one. We get that additional boost. Now, the only problem with that, we're not really in the IPM strategy when we're doing that, Jeff. So.
Right.
But it does seem to return if you put the fungicide on to add that insecticide with it in many cases.
And there's no correlations on locations or anything like that that leads you to a decision of why it makes a difference?
At one time we had a data set with over 52 different field sites and comparisons, and we couldn't draw any conclusions on if it was higher yield, low yield, certain soil types, environment, these types of things. We know that last year, overall, people didn't see much response from a fungicide. This year is quite different though. And in previous years, the range that we saw, I've seen everything from 0 to 10 bushel per acre for a fungicide application in small plot work. So there's just a big range out there, and those producers that are looking at it, I just encourage them to try it if they haven't. Many of our viewers are going to say that they've done this and they're seeing good success with it. Others may try it and not have the good results.
Right. How much should soybean price weigh into this as to whether or not you're going to get your money back out of it?
Oh, it's huge. When we're looking at price, they have to decide what their risk is and then look at, how much they're looking at return. I think you could safely say in that 2 bushel range for what you're going to get, back in general. It may be more than that, just kind of depending on how it plays out. And again, I wish we had the data to say this is when it pays and this isn't. But in general, it seems to be a practice a lot of people like.
So those are the benefits, but certainly a drawback has to be some resistance pressures that we could pop up in some of these fields, no?
Well, we could have resistance, and I'll talk on the fungicide part. I know the entomologists are concerned with the insecticide as well. From the fungicide standpoint, though, I'm not quite as worried because we've got a lot of combination products, and most of the time right now our diseases are in pretty low severity or incidence. So, the main ones that we see in our fields right now would be brown spot. I don't know if anyone out there is going to say, yeah, we were wiped out by brown spot, so we're concerned about resistance developing in that. It is a background one that's out there. And a lot of the products that are again being used, we've got multiple modes of action that are effective against that, so that's a resistance management tool. The other thing is we're also making those applications at very low severity, so that's another strategy to minimize the potential for resistance development. So overall, most of the times our Nebraska farmers are not looking at managing a disease with this fungicide, they're looking for that additional yield advantage. Now the other part of that is if they do have fields that they have one that has that yellowing canopy in the lower level with the brown spot activity, we do know that in our research that we would pick up additional yield in that compared to one that we used 10% as a threshold. So if you had over 10% in the canopy, we'd pick up an additional 0.6 bushel was our number over a big average. So those are the cases where I'd look at it with that, and otherwise they're not going to see a lot of advantage with fungicide use.
A quick question on white mold. We've had some hot weather, specifically today. Is it too late to spray white mold as we get into the following week?
Yeah, so for clarification, when I said they're not going to see other advantages from that fungicide use, that's really related to like white mold. Some of these stem and root rot diseases that we're talking about, those really, the fungicides aren't going to have an effect on those. So when we're looking at white mold management too, really last week before we had the cool weather, it's going to really take off with that. As we get hotter, like now, this week we're in, it's going to really shut down. But if we do have viewers that have had white mold problems, we're going to want to look at using that, and hopefully maybe they made that application at flowering, which should be more critical than at R3 time.
You can learn more about fungicide applications to soybeans at upcoming soybean management field days sponsored by the Nebraska Soybean Board. Those free events take place the second week of August. We'll have more information on locations and topics during next week's episode.